Hello, folks. This is Bela. Our regular listeners and viewers will know that we've been doing an extended series of episodes that chronicle the trip that Mike Malakoff and I made in moving his boat from Brunswick, Georgia, to Burlington, Vermont. And this was took us almost 30 days to do that. And we made almost one episode every day. Actually made a total of 23 recordings that I have been slowly processing and editing and putting up and posting to our channel. And I've been doing about one a week. Well, 23 episodes doing one a week, that's like 23 weeks. It's like half a year. And in the meantime, there's been a couple of other interviews that we've done with some guests. And so what we decided to do was keep doing the Brunswick, Georgia to Burlington, Vermont trip, releasing those episodes one a week. But when I get a new episode with a new guest that I'm recording in the meantime, I'm going to interlace those or introduce them also on an alternate day, but sort of in between the Mike Malakoff episodes. So some weeks you're going to end up seeing two episodes come out. And hopefully once we get through all of the Brunswick, Georgia to Burlington, Vermont episodes, we will get then back to our regular format of episodes where Mike Wasserman and I interview people, we make some commentary, and that's sort of our regular format. But I was fortunate enough to go on this trip with Mike Malakoff, and I thought it'd be important to chronicle those into some pretty good episodes. So hope this is one of those interlaced episodes with a quote-unquote regular guest. Hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, today's guest on the podcast is Charlie Kirchofer. He's been on the podcast before in episode number 133. He reached out to me several months ago via email. And in the first episode, number 133, we discussed the process of purchasing his first big boat, which was a 2022 Beneteau Oceanis 38.1. He lives in Boston, and the boat is located in Annapolis. And he doesn't have a lot of experience in big boats. He doesn't have a lot of experience in, open water or offshore. So his dilemma was, how do I get my boat from Annapolis up to Boston, where I live? So this episode is all about hiring a captain to help him move his boat from Annapolis to Boston. We've had a few episodes where we've taken, where people have purchased boats from far away and they have moved them to their new location various different ways. Some people sailed them themselves, other people got a friend, etc. So this is just another way of sort of moving a boat from point A to point B.
True. And Bela, in every story, it's always stressful for people, right? They've just made this big investment, and whether it's their first boat or their 10th boat, right? I think this idea of moving this brand new boat from point A to point B always is a little bit stress inducing. And I think listeners will really want to listen for that stress that Charlie and his husband kind of went through when they were moving the boat, how they solved it. Did this have a good ending or not? Let's find out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. Let's get right into this episode. Charlie, welcome to the podcast again.
Bela, good to see you again. Glad to be back.
Yeah, I'm good. Same here. So last time you were on the podcast was episode 133. And what we talked about was you buying a new boat down in Annapolis. You live up in Boston. You bought a boat down in Annapolis. And what was on the horizon for you was sailing the boat from Annapolis back to Boston. And you had very sort of limited, let's go out into the deep blue sea type of sailing experience, and you hired a captain. Well, that trip is done. And so I thought it'd be great to have you back on the podcast to talk about how that went. So thank you so much for joining us again.
Yeah, glad to be back.
So remind people, Yeah, right. Yes, you're still here. So remind people the boat that you bought.
We bought a Beneteau Oceanis 38.1
Okay.
from 2022.
Yeah, very nice. And so talk about the trip. You hired a captain. So talk about what that process was like, why you did it, etc.
Right. So I think I mentioned last time he was our broker. So and we had we had met him at the Newport Boat Show years ago. And as it turns out, all the sailors I know in the area know him. You don't even have to say his last name, because Francis is a somewhat unusual name in these times, but everyone goes, "Oh, Francis, yeah." So they know him. His last name is Shyman Hackett, though he does have one. But yeah, everybody knows him. Good reputation. He's at the yacht club where we keep the boat now, and has sold a bunch of people boats there or helped them buy boats. So yeah, that was good. We had gotten to know him. We'd worked with him through the boat buying process, and so it wasn't hiring a captain I'd never met before. So that was good. I had lots of conversations about sailing with him and followed him. He's in the Caribbean each winter and up here in the summer and that kind of thing. So that was pretty easy, a fairly easy choice. I think it gave me a pretty good deal, I guess. I didn't shop around loads, but it seemed reasonable for the amount of time he was spending and the fact that he has to hold a couple of weeks free because you don't know when the window is going to be, right? So it's not like if you hired a charter captain for 4 days, it's a big difference, right? Because they've got just those 4 days. Yeah, so that was relatively straightforward. And the reason I did it is because we definitely would not be comfortable taking that boat ourselves.
Yeah. So I just helped a friend move a boat from Brunswick, Georgia, all the way up to Lake Champlain, Vermont. So up the East Coast, up the Hudson River, up the Champlain Canal. And he decided to see if he could get a friend to help him. Did you consider like any people that that sail and approach any of them to help you? Or did you want sort of a licensed captain for this trip?
I think I wanted a licensed captain. I have friends who sail, which, and some of them I think are likely experienced enough. But, they've also got to take time off work and you got to plan together. And just knowing I had a guy who did a lot of offshore passages and was used to looking for weather windows and, who could say, oh, this looks good or this doesn't because you didn't look at this thing or remember this, or like this forecast model is more accurate for this area and things like that he knows. And he's done that particular passage many times. So I didn't really consider it because I was mostly comfortable with the idea of Francis doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point because even on this most recent trip I did with my friend, every time you go out sailing with somebody, I always learn something. And this was an opportunity for you to really maximize that time window that you're out because you're with someone really experienced and you're going to learn a whole bunch of more things and than you would if you went with a friend of yours.
Sure. Yeah. And he also he's still an ASA certified instructor. He used to work at or run a sailing school in St. Thomas or something. So he had that as well.
Yeah. Super. So did you guys leave from Baltimore? Is that where you sort of met him and you took off from there?
From Annapolis.
Oh, excuse me, Annapolis. So talk about the trip. Yeah. Talk about like the day or two before. What were you doing?
So a few days before we had been watching this weather window and saying, okay, it looks good. Let's see if it holds. And we did. It ended up being a Saturday to Tuesday. I think it was Saturday I think it was the 10th to 13th of May. And 2 days before we said, yep, or maybe even 3, we had to drop off the dog, get him boarded. We had to fly down after work, and then we worked from Annapolis. So we had a hotel room there. I actually took that day off. My husband still had to work at least in the morning. And then, we went provisioning in the morning. We went to the supermarket. We had a refrigerator in our hotel room, luckily, because we got one of those, like a residence inn type thing where you have a small kitchen. So we stored the stuff there until after his work, and then we went out, took the water taxi out to the boat, which thankfully was running, because when we put the boat in the water a couple of weeks before, the water taxi was not running, which we discovered once we got the boat onto the mooring. So we were stranded until a pontoon boat motored by, and we asked them if they could bring us over to that dock 300 feet away, and they did that. So that was lucky. And then we actually had to go back out again because I took a photo of the mooring ball so I would remember the number. And then I looked at the photo afterwards and it said, this says seasonal mooring only, no transients on it. And I called the harbor master and he's like, you have to move it. And we're like, shit, we had a plane to catch. I had to get back out there. We didn't know how to get out there. The guy at Bert Jabin's yacht yard, we asked if he could just bring us over, and he sort of, he's not supposed to do that. Okay, but he did. He's like, I can't bring you back though, because we're moving the boat. And we're like, sure. The guy had helped us put it in the water, knew somebody at one of the sailing schools who came and picked us up after we moved it to another mooring. So it all worked out, but it was very rushed. And so rushed, in fact, that I forgot to turn off all the battery switches. So when we got to the boat for the delivery, we got on board. I went to the panel, nothing, no display on, nothing was showing up. Uncovered the engine battery, and I think it was 11 point something volts. So even the starter battery had drained. And then I said, well, we'll start the generator. The generator was generating 95 volts instead of 120. And so that wasn't working. And if we tried to run the battery charger off it, it just shut down. So we had our first electrical gremlins day one, and Francis wasn't there yet. It was just Ralph and I. I had never really piloted this boat. We turned on the engine, and I expected when the alternator ran to see the voltage go up on the battery, and it didn't. And so then we thought, oh, maybe the alternator got fried somehow during the, I don't know. I had no idea. So I called Francis and he said, get it to a dock right away. And I thought, okay, docking ourselves, cool. He's like, yeah, it's going to be much easier to handle any problems on the dock. And, I'll see you guys at midnight. And I said, hey, does this thing, does this type of diesel engine need electricity from the battery to keep running? So like if the battery dies completely while we're motoring over there, is the engine going to shut off? And he said, yes. So he said, do it quickly. You should have plenty of battery to get it over to Severn Sailing Association. So it should be fine. And I love should be and should have and all.
Right.
So I was just,
oh my gosh,
really stressed. We got it over there. We docked. Of course, the dock had these pilings on it, which are much thicker than our fenders. So we kind of scraped along there. Luckily, the rub rail met it, so it wasn't too bad. I didn't T-bone the dock. We did a stopping spring. It all worked quite well. My training from ASA kicked in, and so it was all fine. We got it docked and secured, and went to go have a drink and dinner. So got the boat put away and said, okay, we did it. We moved it. Nothing broke. On the way over, the voltage on the battery went up, and we discovered that it was charging. And in the evening, we left the engine running I revved it up a bit and ran it for a couple of hours. The domestic bank got up to, 12.8 volts or whatever. And so things seem to be fine. And I can say now the batteries are all okay. They all hold a charge and they run for a decent long period, but they got possibly just over the winter very discharged.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why or how.
Yeah, I know on my boat, even though you turn those big red switches to off, some things are still not disconnected. So when my boat's on the hard for the winter, I actually go down and I disconnect the battery terminals.
So according to the people I had decommission it, they had done that.
Okay.
And I think they actually did, because they also put terminal covers on. That was on my list of things to do because there weren't any, and they have them now. So they must have done that at least in the spring. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe just it was on the mooring for a couple of weeks with the switches on. So maybe that was just enough. I don't know.
Yeah, and who knows, what kind of stuff is sort of running in the background. It's always
Right.
it's always hard to tell. Well, that was a great start to the day. So then Francis gets there, and
Midnight.
so
Yeah.
let me ask you another question. Provisioning. How did you kind of think about provisioning?
Well, Ralph is a great cook, so he handled all of that. Really, I mean, he thought about. We asked Francis, do you have anything you don't like and any food allergies? And it's a good thing we asked, because he had some food allergies that we would probably not have taken into account. So, and he just planned out what he was going to cook each day. He planned for, one pot meals or things that weren't going to require a lot of cooking, that we'd be able to, was not going to cook 3 meals a day or anything. Breakfast, lunch stuff we can take easily. He did make gnocchi the first day, which was delicious. And there were some meals after that that were fairly easy to prepare. But yeah, he did cook some underway, which was great. So
how many days did you plan for when you provisioned?
I think we planned for 4, knowing that, we weren't crossing to the Marquesas, right? So if we needed food, it wouldn't be far away. And even if we needed rescue, we were going to get rescued within 24 hours. So, we had food easily for 4 days, and then, snacks and extra things. And then, we had water for at least 4 days as well. So yeah, that was okay. And in fact, there's still some food on the boat from the delivery. So we had a little bit left over.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So you leave Annapolis, and tell me about leaving and sort of the first day.
Yeah. So we left not long after sunrise, and it was fairly windy and choppy on the Chesapeake that day. But luckily we were on a beam or broad reach most of the way. So even though we were heeling a bit, but when I looked at ships coming the other way, you could see waves splashing over their bows and stuff. So it felt to me like we were going into the wind, but looking at them going the other way, they had a harder slog. So
yeah.
By the time we got up to the C&D Canal, though, it was totally calm. And so we just motored along the canal, had lunch on our way through there. So everything went well, and we actually got to the canal without having to motor. And then after that, we did a lot of motoring the journey in general, but motored the canal. We came down Delaware Bay doing 10 knots over ground with the current at one point, and we got to sail down, and we had the wind again a broad reach, so it had shifted the other way. That was why the weather window looked good. And so Ralph and I did that until sunset, and Francis took over at sunset, because he said, the hardest part of the passage would be Delaware Bay with all the traffic. There's shallows, and then rounding Cape May can be hazardous. You can go out and follow the channel, but it's quite a bit farther along.
Yes, that's right.
He had some routes over the shoals that he knew of. And so while we were down sleeping, we did not sleep that first attempt, because we knew we were getting up at midnight or something. We heard him start up the engine at one point and then turn it back off again. And that was because he said he was going over a shoal with about 6.5 feet deep with a boat with 5.5 foot keel. So he turned on the engine to steer around it. But then, he woke us up after we'd rounded Cape May, and it was this beautiful, flat, calm night, moonlit. It was a full moon, so we had good visibility, and we were just motoring along there towards Atlantic City. But it was a beautiful first night. And finally, at 3 a.m., I said, I can't stay awake any longer. We went and woke him up. So he got 3 hours of sleep. We slept until maybe 5 and kind of woke up and saw, oh, there's Atlantic City. So we got like 2 hours of sleep that first night, which was starting to concern me, but it worked out okay. But then we pulled in to Atlantic City a little after sunrise, and there's a self-service fuel dock there, which is surprising because if you know New Jersey, you can't self-service fuel your car.
Right.
But there's a self-service boat fuel dock. So yeah, but the first diesel fuel pump, we all tried our cards, none of them worked. So we're like, this is a problem. And then we went to the other one, it was the same deal. And then Francis, in the last ditch effort, noticed there was a card reader on the backside and tried that, and then it worked. So we managed to get our diesel fuel, and we have a 34-gallon tank, and I think like 33 gallons went in.
Wow.
So it was really close. So we learned he was like, oh no, that it's still, the fuel gauge is working because it's going down, and it said we have half a tank, I don't know how many hours ago. As we're coming into Atlantic City, he's like, what does it say now? And I looked and I said, it says empty. So we learned, the tank is probably shaped like this.
Yes.
The halfway is like 2/3 down of the volume. So we now know it goes down more quickly in the bottom half for sure.
Yeah.
But we made it. And then we had lunch, we had breakfast at a diner there just for fun.
Sure. Very nice. And then after breakfast, you went back out?
We headed straight back off again. Yeah, Francis was keen to keep moving because headwinds were coming. And so we went straight across from Cape May, just basically a straight line up into Buzzards Bay. It was lined up, or not Cape May, but Atlantic City. Yeah. So we would pass just south of Block Island and then straight up into Buzzards Bay. And if we moved quickly enough, we would get beyond where the headwinds were. The headwinds would fill in behind us, and we would stay in flat, calm water as it moved east. But we needed to go quickly. So yeah, I mean, I think we had breakfast at 6 or something, and then we were before 7. We were out on the water again.
Yeah.
On a glassy sea or an oily sea. So there were still some rolling small waves, but they were shiny because it was so calm.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Yeah, and so Atlantic City out towards Montauk, south of Block Island, Buzzards Bay, motoring, sailing, combination of both.
Motoring the whole way. We didn't even have the sails up. It was just flat calm the entire until Buzzards Bay. Buzzards Bay, the wind started to fill in again, but it was totally calm. So we got very used to the for 36 hours of engine running. But I was happy with that. We had enough fuel, 34 gallons of fuel now was plenty to get us through. We also saw on the gauge that I figured a gallon an hour. It actually consumes far less than that.
Yeah.
So around 0.6. And if you're motor sailing, 0.4, if the wind's decent, 0.2, right? So it really doesn't burn a lot of fuel. So it's like, all right, plenty of fuel and off we go. Rather that than rough conditions. So it was a super calm passage. We saw these dolphins that swam in the bow wave, and they just came, they came shooting under. They were so fast. That was a real highlight. I've always been jealous of all the YouTube sailors posting the dolphin photos and videos and stuff. And I really wanted to see that sometime, and to see it on our own boat was really cool. Yeah, that was exciting. And then after that, we saw this tall ship sitting, 3-masted tall ship, just drifting around, 40, 50 miles off of Long Island and New Jersey. And we later on, I said, wait a minute. I went back and looked at that photo. I remember it having a weird name on the AIS and not being sure how to pronounce it. And it was the Cuauhtémoc or something, the Mexican naval training ship that hit the Brooklyn Bridge a few days after that.
Oh my God.
So, and I don't know if they were adrift there because they had engine trouble and there was zero wind or what, but at the time we thought, oh yeah, it's a beautiful tall ship. I wonder what they're doing there. Maybe they're doing research or something. And then later on, I made the connection that, oh, that was that ship that we saw. So, that was interesting. The other thing we saw out there was loads of Mylar balloons.
Yes.
Hundreds of them floating out there. I don't know if it was from one party or balloon launch or what, or just they happened to collect out there. We even fished one out that came close.
Yeah.
And a seal. We're motoring along and a seal popped its head up right in front of the boat and didn't seem like it was going to move. So I actually took it off autopilot and went around, and the seal just kind of turned and looked at me right next to me. It
Oh,
was right
cool.
there next to me, just looking up like, what are you doing out here?
Yeah.
So that was the dolphins and the seal and the tall ship, minus the tragedy, which we didn't know was going to happen, of course, were all really cool things to see out there. And
Yeah.
this golden songbird, the songbird landed in the rigging and hung out with us for a while. I actually put out some water for it, but I, in the process, scared it away and it flew off. Hopefully it made it back to land, because it was,
Yeah.
we were out of sight of land at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long did that leg from Atlantic City to Buzzards Bay take you?
I mean, probably 36 hours. So we got to the Cape Cod Canal at around, so we exited the canal into Cape Cod Bay when it was getting dark. So it was, the sun was setting in the Cape Cod Canal the next day. So that was Sunday. So yeah, by Monday evening, we were at the Cape Cod Canal. So we got to Buzzards Bay, late morning on Monday then.
And how did you guys do watches? How did you set that up?
So we did end up doing only night watches officially. And this, I know you like the structured watches.
Yes.
This worked well for me. So Ralph and I didn't want to do them alone. I'm colorblind, and Ralph didn't want to be on watch by himself. So we and Francis got the short end of the stick there, but he is the paid skipper. So we took the first watch from 6 to 9 p.m. where you probably can't sleep anyway. And so then he had to stay up till midnight. And we would go down, and that night we slept from 9 till midnight. And then we did midnight until 3 a.m. and then slept until 6, and we slept full 3 hours. Each of those 2 watches we slept, the whole time, and got up at 6 a.m. And then at 6 a.m., the rule was let Francis sleep until at least 10. Don't disturb him, because he didn't sleep much. But we could stand solo during the day, so we could switch to 4 hours during the day.
Right.
And that was also just between Ralph and me, whoever was more awake. So like we both be up at 6 because we get up early anyway. But oftentimes I found by 8 I was flagging again.
Yes.
So I'd go down and have a nap for a bit. And then invariably, I would doze. It might be an hour or so. And then I'd be kind of awake, and I'd come up, and then he'd be sort of sleepy, and he'd go down and doze. So that sort of informal system worked well during the day, of just whoever I found for a couple hours at a time. I'd be awake, and then I'd kind of want to take a nap. And so we would just sort of alternate.
Yeah.
And then Francis would get up around noon when Ralph made lunch, and then, he could take over for a bit, and we'd both take a nap in the afternoon at some point, and then we'd get ready for our, more structured cycle overnight. So the nights 2 and 3, the structured setup worked well. And night 1 we tried, but we didn't sleep. So
yeah, it's amazing how I find the same thing. Night 1, I rarely sleep because you're running on adrenaline. But night 2, you're so freaking exhausted, you just go out. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So you hit the canal, Cape Cod Canal. I assume you plan the tide there, because if you don't, you can take a real long time to get through.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had a decent wind in Buzzards Bay, but it was right behind us. So we were on a dead run, and you need a lot of wind to move fast when you're moving with it. So
yes,
we actually motor sailed despite having a good wind, because we needed to keep up 6 knots to make the canal before it turned. So we had to keep moving, and so the canal transit, we did that. Francis had gone down to nap because it must have been 6 when we got into the canal, or even a little bit later. We took over before then, and that was fun. I crossed over those bridges many times because I go to the Cape, but I'd never been down below in the canal, so that was neat.
Yeah.
So that was nice transit, no issues. We saw the training ship. I think the Massachusetts Maritime Academy is right at the opening to the canal. So they've got a ship that acts as their school. So that was kind of neat to see that. And then it was supposed to be flat calm. So when Francis went down below, he was like, it's going to be dead calm when you come out of the canal. It was not. So we came out of the canal, and it was choppy and windy, and my anxiety came up a bit there. And we had this boat in front of us that we passed in the canal looked like it had been traveling around the world. It was a small sailboat, but loads of stuff piled on it. The guy must live on board, all of his equipment and like things in bags and covered and tied down to the deck and stuff. And so, when he came out of the canal, he put up the main and rolled out his jib and heeled over and headed off. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know. I'm not sure if I feel comfortable sailing in this. I mean, it was gusting into the mid-20s, I guess. It wasn't nothing, it wasn't a gale or anything, but in the end we decided, let's roll out a bit of the Genoa and see how we feel. And so we rolled out a bit and put the engine in neutral and slowed down to 4 knots. And I said, well, this is a bit boring. Gesundheit. Or did you inhale some water? Mm.
I'm all right.
Do you want to pause and cut that?
No. Keep going.
All right. So we rolled out a bit and it was like, well, this isn't fast enough. So we ended up rolling out the full Genoa, and then we were cruising along between 5 and 6 knots, and I was happy with that. And we just left the main down because we would have had to turn into the wind. That mast track, and I want to do something about it at some point. The slides are not very slippery. So you need to take, if the sail is at an angle to the mast with the boom out, it doesn't slide up and down very easily. So you kind of have to point head to wind to raise the main, and I didn't really want to do it. So we sailed along with just the Genoa, and that was fine. And then Francis took over, and we went down below. And then I hear beep, 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 beep of the autopilot. And then I hear winches grinding. And then I feel us heeling over a little bit. And I hear the water accelerating. I was like, okay, he's sailing harder than we were. He's trying to get some speed out of it. But he also didn't bother to put up the main or anything. We did pretty well. And engines ran for a while and then turned off again because the wind died, but then came back. And then we came on for our watch at midnight. There was still, the wind was lower, but there was still a bit of wind. And, by this point, I'm feeling like, hey, we're doing great, feeling more confident. And of course, what happens then. There's an incident. So there was a wind shift. And, so we got headed, and then we needed to tack, actually. Suddenly the jib, I don't even remember exactly what happened when, but it ended up with the Genoa getting backwinded. And then we needed to tack it over, but there was a winch override. So Ralph wasn't able to get it off. Ralph wasn't able to get it off the winch. Then the autopilot starts beeping at me because the helm's all the way over. And I'm thinking, oh, there's so much force on the wheel. I wasn't thinking, we had just woken up too. I came up on deck and within and Francis headed down to sleep before I had even gotten on deck. Like I was in the bathroom and Ralph was up there alone, and like Francis was in bed already, and was like, so I was a little bit panicked, still asleep. And that all happened immediately. I didn't realize we were just hove to. That's what happened. The jib had backwinded. We had turned off course. The autopilot tried to turn to starboard to keep us on course, which it couldn't. And so we just stopped. And then the autopilot's beeping because the helm is at maximum. So in other words, hove to in a great position. You're not moving the direction you want to go, but there's no danger, right? It's a very safe position to be in. And Ralph did manage to get the winch working. I'm not sure what happened there. And we decided, all right, the wind is shifty and it's pretty much right in front of us. Let's furl the Genoa. And we now had it on the same side because I would normally put it on the sheet winch, potentially the furling line. If I need to bring it in, it can be hard to, I can kind of do it without, but it's tough. If there's any resistance on it, I kind of need a winch. But that winch wasn't available because the because it was being used by the sheet to
Yes.
pay it out. So we put it on that main halyard winch, which is electric. And Francis had mentioned that you can do that, and I know that you need to be careful when you do that. But very quickly it went, ding, 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 ding. So it was very quickly like, uh-oh, it's not furling.
Yes.
Ralph was like, what do we do now? And I was like, I don't know. we can't sail. We can't turn into the wind. The autopilot has shut itself off.
Yes.
We can't furl it up. I don't know what to do. So I called Francis.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, can you come up here? And he was like, what were you thinking? Putting it on that winch? And I didn't bother to mention that he had mentioned it as an idea.
Right.
And he's like, that is way too much pressure on it. You probably broke something. Let's bear off and get downwind. So we turned downwind to get the pressure off the sail, and because we had plenty of room in both directions. And then he went forward, and the furling line had come. Oh, there was a time when the sail was flogging before we got it under control, before the winch override. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And we think during that time that the furling line was loose enough that it hopped up on top of the drum.
Ah, yes.
So he had to loosen that and get it back down. And also the nearest fair lead was a couple of stanchions away. And so it's probably too far away. And I've since installed another fair lead closer to the drum so that it leads fairer to the middle of the drum. And so hopefully we won't have it skipping off again.
Yeah.
So that's one modification I made since then. So he got that back down. Nothing was broken. We furled away the jib and motored off because now we had very little wind anyway, and we motored off towards Boston, and that was fine. We got pretty good at using the radar. I'm amazed that you can see things as small as a buoy, and pretty small things show up on the radar.
Yes.
So we were using that both nights, and I could see, I see it on the chart, I see it on the radar side by side, coming up, avoiding it. I think the radar is like a few degrees off because I kept moving over, and it looked like it was right in front of us, and it was actually quite a ways off. The chart said it was off to starboard, but I believe the radar over the chart because who knows? And I still couldn't see it, so I had Ralph sighting, sweeping with the searchlight. Where is this unlit buoy? Because it looks like I moved, and now I'm heading straight for it.
Yes.
But then he discovered it quite a ways off to starboard. But then, is that the right one, or is there another one? And it was fine. But other than that, totally uneventful. There were two other boats sailing in the same direction at roughly the same speed, which was kind of nice, just watching them through the night, all heading towards Boston. And Francis took back over at 3. And and we got up early again at like 5 or actually 4 something, because we were already pulling into Boston Harbor. We didn't want to miss that.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Any people get seasick? Any seasickness issues?
No. And not only that, but I didn't even take anything. So I had Dramamine with me. It was a super calm passage. I mean, if there was a passage that you were not going to get seasick on, it was this one.
This was,
it was a little rolly that first bit in the Chesapeake, and I thought, am I getting a bit queasy? And I had some ginger candies that I use, and I don't know if they helped or not. But also I got pretty good at, I always move against the boat. And so even if I'm inside, I can tell my eyes that the boat is moving because I rock with it or against it, so I was always in motion, and I think that helps a lot. But no, it was fine. And Ralph had a scopolamine patch, and when that fell off, he didn't replace it, and was also fine.
Well,
so,
good.
No seasickness. That turned out fine. That was one I was worried about. I was worried about not sleeping. That turned out okay the second day, which is pretty standard. And only really that one incident with the furling drum was the only thing that was sketchy. But I did think about that a lot for a long time afterwards. And it did, I was building confidence, and it dropped way back down again, because I thought, I don't know what I would have done next. I was able to call Francis. If he hadn't been on the boat, like I was not able to think of what the problem could be. And I had no experience with furling anything, right? I didn't have furling anything on my boat before. So didn't even, I guess I eventually would have thought to have a look at the furling system or something. I guess I eventually would have figured it out, but that was a little scary. But coming to Boston Harbor, just glass. So the city lights reflected in the water, and motoring in there. So that was a really triumphant arrival.
Yeah.
And we got in a little after 5, took some photos. The tender service at the yacht club didn't start till 9, so we couldn't get off the boat. So we all went down and took a nap.
Yeah.
And then got up and got ready, and got picked up by the tender, and that was it. So it's amazing. It felt like on the boat for all those days, felt like I'd never been anywhere else, and I felt like I could have continued, right? Once we got into that rhythm,
yes,
I wouldn't have minded going on for several days more. I was having fun and really enjoyed it. And it seemed like it was a long time. And then all of a sudden it was over. So.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a wonderful, wonderful trip. So other than the thing with your foresail, your jib, any other sort of unexpected things or things that doesn't necessarily mean they were bad, but did you experience things that were like, wow, I didn't expect that?
Well, the generator. And still to this day, I need to, it kind of works now. And so that means I got lazy and haven't called to get on a list with a technician. But I was actually on the boat yesterday, and I was charging up the batteries with the generator, and it ran for 45 minutes or so, and then beep, low voltage error, and shut itself down. So we think maybe a bad capacitor or something. So there's still something not quite right. But other than that, I mean, the surprises were, I was just, the sunsets and the Mylar balloons were a negative surprise, but I thought it was interesting seeing other people going in the same direction. I mean, it went up Buzzards Bay, the Cape Cod Canal. So clearly it's like there are several of us on this journey. We're all going to Boston. And it's a world that if you live on land, you're not very aware of sailing, you don't think about people moving around in the middle of the night, traveling places on boats, so I felt like I'd gotten into an exclusive fraternity of people.
I don't, cool. It may not be exclusive. It's certainly a weirdo community.
Well, exclusive, not in the sense that the people exclude others, but exclusive in the sense that not many people are in it.
Not many people. Yes, understand. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It was amazing coming up from Georgia to Lake Champlain. We would hopscotch these various different people that we'd see. We'd get ahead of them, but then we'd stay someplace for 2 or 3 days, and they would catch up and get ahead of us. And it was amazing to see these same people numerous times on this 1,200-mile journey.
And comforting. I liked that. We also saw the offshore wind farm so Block Island has some windmills, but then southeast of it there's one under construction, and a friend of mine works there, so I sent him photos. We saw a ship with the mast or the tower portion of it being carried out there. That was neat to see. So that was great, and I was also not surprised but very happy that Ralph really liked it too. And because I wasn't worried that he wouldn't. He does. I had friends who were like, "Are you sure that he's going to want to do that?" And it's not like a holiday, and they don't know that Ralph he's biking across Austria, and so he's used to hardship and being uncomfortable. But it wasn't really uncomfortable. Even the sleep cycles weren't that much of a hardship. And I found the idea of doing overnight passages no longer so, I thought, there's no way I'd want to do that. But now I think, well, if that's when the weather window is, especially sunset, departure, sunrise, arrival, so you're arriving and departing in sunlight, it's not bad. There's not usually much traffic out there. There's not much to hit. I mean, depending on where you are, but we were in the shipping lanes coming out of New York City, and we barely saw any ships out there off of Long Island. So it wasn't like, I think Delaware Bay, different. There were many more ships. But AIS, those big ships they're all on it. They're pretty easy to avoid, and they stay in the channels. More worried about fishing boats and things.
Right.
And I did have an incident where I was not sure what a fishing boat was doing, but it was actually on AIS, which was sort of surprising.
Yes.
Because oftentimes they aren't. So I was always on the lookout for that. But yeah, those things were not surprising, but they pleasantly, sort of surprised. They made me happy.
Yeah.
That the nighttime thing wasn't so scary, and that Ralph also enjoyed it, and that we actually had a really nice time, and not because I wasn't sure if it was just going to be something we had to get through, that was going to be difficult. I didn't dare to hope that it would be super fun, and it kind of was like a vacation. I mean, we were tired, but we had a cool time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Nighttime passages, I really enjoy them a lot. I find them to be, 2:00 in the morning, sitting in the cockpit is a magical time for me. From many different perspectives. It's magical and it's spiritual, all combined into one. So I find them to be very nice.
It's beautiful out there.
Yeah, it sure is. So any plans for the summer here?
Yes. So next weekend, we are hoping to sail to Provincetown just for the weekend. And, that's going to be, I kind of looked, okay, if it were going to be this Friday, what will we do? And, this Friday, there's going to be, they're predicting some of the models gale force gusts during the day.
Yeah.
So it's like, that wouldn't be too fun for a passage. But the sustained winds are only 12, 13 knots. So maybe it'd be all right. Maybe we would just motor sail. Maybe we just motor. I think we probably would be okay. Even leaving overnight. So we have some options. Like we might, our plan A is Thursday night, we get on the boat, bring it out to one of the harbor islands and grab a mooring there, because it's about 45 minutes to an hour. So just getting out of Boston Harbor takes quite a while.
Right.
From there, we exit the harbor within 15 minutes, and then we're out in Cape Cod Bay or Massachusetts Bay. And so we would leave from there first thing Friday morning at first light, and we'd be in Provincetown before lunch, right? So that's plan A. Plan B would be to skip that first part and do it straight from Friday morning from the club, and it would take a bit longer. Plan C is doing it overnight all the way Thursday if the weather on Friday doesn't look as good. And plan D would be leaving later Friday, or even an overnight Friday into Saturday, where you start to wonder if it's worth it because you're coming back on Sunday. But
Right.
we got multiple plans. Coming back is more difficult because we have less flexibility. So definitely have to look at, do we leave first thing Sunday, to overnight Sunday into Monday? That's the end option. Or worst case, we leave the boat there and come back for it some other time if we really had to. But the weather forecast by the time we depart for the return on Sunday should be good enough that we're not facing conditions like that, which would be, I would leave the boat there if we were going to have a gale coming or something. And the idea that we wouldn't have any idea of that 2 days before is fairly small chance. So we're going to see how that goes. That'll be our first cruise, just the two of us. We've sailed around the harbor a few times, and that was nice, but that'll be our first solo cruise, possibly with a night element. And then we're doing it for a week in July as well, where we're going to live on the boat for a week there, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. It's amazing how, normally you travel in a car. You're not really in tune to the weather other than maybe a snowstorm, right? Or a blizzard, right? Other than that, you kind of go. Yeah. And even on an airplane, maybe a little bit, but the weather doesn't play a big role in your decisions to travel. But man, when you're in a boat, it's like 90% of the decision process.
Yeah, and it's huge. And even, this week, I wanted to take my parents out for a sail on Friday. It's their anniversary. And, as I mentioned, the gale force gusts, that doesn't sound like a relaxing harbor sail with the parents. So I said, we're not going to be able to do it. And I keep wanting to make plans and they keep getting ruined.
Yeah.
I think it's, either there's, today it was a possibility, but there's a pretty high Cape index in the afternoon. So there's chance of thunderstorms, and some of the forecast models say it's going to be gusting 30. Others say it'll be gusting 18. So, it's really the gust predictions in particular I've noticed are very, it's a crapshoot.
It is a crapshoot.
I don't know what to believe. So yeah. End up making a lot of plan B, C, and D.
Yes. And the other thing that I have sort of experienced is that high winds you can sort of deal with and say, okay, I'm going to motor sail, or I'm going to just take my sails down completely and motor. It's the waves that have a lot to do with your comfort or your discomfort, and looking at the wave models and seeing how tall the waves are going to be, and also how far apart they're going to be. And a little rule of thumb that I have used in the past, I learned it from someone, or I heard it from somewhere, that says if the wave height, you want the period of the waves to be twice the wave height. So in other words, if the waves are 3 feet tall, you want them to be at least 6 seconds apart. If they're closer than 6 seconds, it becomes more uncomfortable. And so that's the thing that particularly when you're in Narragansett Bay, I don't really worry about waves because, there's not a lot of fetch except if the wind is howling from the south. And even there, it's not bad. So you got to look at, the direction of the waves, where they're coming from, and the height, because the wind you can sort of deal with, unless it's like blowing at 40 and then, all hell breaks loose. Anyway.
Yeah, the wave forecasts for this whole weekend are fine. All the models are showing under a meter.
Yeah.
Right. And predicting. So that part is at least okay, which is why I said, we could motor if it's too gusty and weird. If we wanted to get to Provincetown, we could motor there. Because I want to sail, but we have places we want to get to enjoy being there. So we're trying to combine those. But yeah, we definitely, when we were planning the passage, I was looking a lot at what the sea state was going to be like. And there were periods of, if you do the departure planning and predict wind is pretty cool. Yes. It will show you what percentage of that journey with each departure time where you're going to have waves below a meter, between 1 and 2 meters, between 2 and 3 meters. And I was watching in the weeks prior, and when I first looked, it was like, oh, below a meter the whole way. That's cool. And then a lot of it was 2 to 3, and then it was sometimes like over 3, where I was like 3 meters. Those are 10 feet. That's right. Those
are big waves.
So
those are
definitely
big waves.
Not going during a time like that. And
you're looking up at 10-foot waves,
right?
I don't want to be looking up at the waves.
Yeah, and even the 1 to 2 meters, 6 foot. If it's a nice rolling swell, I guess it's okay, but that's a good size. You're going to be rolling. You much higher chance of C6. So I was really hoping for under a meter.
Yeah,
which out in the open ocean is not super common, but we found that window. We were lucky. May 10th to 13th. It was below a meter the whole way. So and up here in Cape Cod Bay, that's pretty normal. It has to be blowing pretty hard from the north.
That's right.
To get because it's open to the north. Massachusetts Bay is more open to the east, but you can, for the most part, waves under a meter, you can find that window. So that is one of my criteria is, no waves over 3 feet during the passage.
Yeah, I find that with my limited experience, I find that those wind models, the further away you are from land, the better they are. Mm-hmm. And the closer you get to land, the more you have these micro influences of the land and the heating of the land. And if it's a sunny day versus a cloudy day, et cetera, that the wind models are a whole heck of a lot less accurate.
They don't do great with sea breezes. I mean, a couple of them do, but it must be difficult, when you've got a prevailing westerly, but then the sea breeze is going to come like this, to know exactly how that's going to interact and where.
That's right.
It's difficult, right? I mean, there's I've experienced it a few times where I would head out in the boat with westerlies and then hit this dead calm area, and I think, this is where the sea breeze and the westerly are hitting each other, and it's just, there's just no wind, and I would look out farther in the harbor and see boats heeling over in the sea breeze.
Yes.
I think it's hard for the models to predict that exactly. And I've also experienced wind funneling between two islands and gusts being significantly more than expected. So that's true. You never know.
So one last question: if you're going to do a multiple day passage, let's say a multiple day passage is in your future, what would you do different than you did on your Annapolis to Boston journey?
That's interesting. I don't know if I would do anything differently. I think we probably would be standing solo watches. It would depend on who we're, do I have help or not? I think it's always nice to have more than two people.
I agree.
Three is pretty ideal. More than that, you start to have trouble with sleeping arrangements. But I think 3 people is great because you're spending more time off than on.
Yes.
So that's good.
I agree.
But yeah, I would try to have a third person. We probably would stand solo watches more so that we can sleep more. But maybe not. I don't know. I'm not planning any multi-day passages yet. And I think I like the idea of spending the night someplace on the way somewhere like Martha's Vineyard, going down to Onset first, spending the night there, and then continuing on to Martha's Vineyard. We might do that next year. This year, we're really just doing Provincetown and Boston Harbor because everything else is multi-day. And if it's multi-day, you can't do it on a weekend. So then you got to leave the boat there, or you've got to work from there. We haven't tested that out yet. So there's just so many more logistics if you can't get there and back in a shorter time. Then you have to intentionally. Then you've got to plan to stay somewhere for a week, or more. And then you're doing a lot more logistical planning.
The friend of mine who I helped move his boat, Mike Malikoff, who's been on the podcast numerous times, he has Starlink on his boat.
Right.
And so we were constantly connected.
We did too, actually.
Yeah. But what we learned was, I guess they have various different plans. I don't know a lot about Starlink.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard that. I listened to that. Yep. Yeah. Francis
12
had
miles.
to switch over to a pay as you go offshore plan or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So he could get Starlink. Yeah.
Because the first night out, we were out and we went more than 12 miles offshore, and all of a sudden Starlink stopped working. And we go, oh my God, what's going on? And then it's amazing how, we got accustomed to having constant connectivity, and then all of a sudden we didn't have it. And, but anyway, it's amazing how that service makes working on your boat. If you can work from home, you can almost fundamentally work on your boat.
Right.
And that makes it really possible almost anywhere.
Yeah, we're planning on doing that. And I worked on my boat yesterday afternoon. I traveled to the boat during my lunch break.
Yeah.
And then I worked on the boat in the afternoon because I wanted to take the Bimini down because of the gust forecast, just to be safe. And also I just hadn't been on the boat in a while and wanted to go there. And it's a half hour away, so why not? But we have 5G connection at Savin Hill that's quite good in the mooring field. So I did video calls. It was perfect, but plenty of places wouldn't have that. I don't love Elon Musk, so to put it that way. And so I would prefer not to get Starlink at the moment.
Yeah.
I am hoping that the competitor Project Kuiper from Amazon / Jeff Bezos gets off the ground as they say they're going to, but Starlink is just so far ahead of everyone else.
Yep, it sure is.
It's going to be hard to catch up, and it works really well. So we'll see. I have vague ideas in the future about, spending like a month gung-holing up the coast of Maine or something and just working as we go and sailing up on the weekends and things like that, or, short hops after work, however it works out. And then just truly going wherever the weather dictates, right? Just saying, okay, this is the weather we have this weekend. Where can we go with that? and just being free that way. But we would definitely need satellite internet.
Yeah.
if we were gonna
There's
do
speaking of that, there's a person I know who used to be at our marina, and they spend the winters in Florida and the summers up in New England someplace. And they've been
Mhm.
doing this for 10 plus years.
That's a dream.
And him and his wife only do 4 hours a day moving the boat. So
Right.
the point is, you can do that on the East Coast. You
Yeah.
can travel all the way from Florida, all the way up to Bangor, Maine, and all you have to do is 4 hours at 5.5 knots. And sometimes you got to anchor out, sometimes you can go to marinas, but that's to me, one of the real beauties of the East Coast. So you can do these short. I mean, yeah, maybe some days he does 5 or 6 hours, but right on average, it's 4 hours. He said that's just sort of their limit. They're my age, right? And they don't want to go. They don't want to push themselves for 10 hours a day, and that's the beauty of it. And then that opens up all sorts of possibilities. When you have this good connectivity, you can do that. If that's something you want to do for the summer or a month or a week or whatever.
It must be taking the intracoastal, no?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, they take the ICW most of the way. There are a fair number of places you can go out and come back in, and go out and come back in.
Mhm.
But the cost of going out and then coming back in is almost not worth it.
Right. Yeah.
Right, because oftentimes you're not making northerly progress. you're going east, going north a little bit, and then turning back west again.
Right.
So, but the ICW is really nice. I mean, the trip I just did, we did about half outside, half on the ICW, and ICW's, I enjoy it. It's kind of nice.
So it's not. I'm always reading about the charts can't keep up because of shoaling, and so it's easy to run aground in mud, and there's lots of bridges you have to wait for, and traffic, and so it sounds kind of stressful and slow going. But you found it.
Well, so there's this website where this person named Bob423, I think is the name of it, and I think if you search for Bob423, he, like almost every day or at least once a week, puts out a set of waypoints for the ICW, and somehow collects information about where the shoaling exists, etc. So you can download these routes to your chart plotter, and we use those religiously. And everybody who does the ICW, I mean, that's the big buzz. The guy does it for free. It's remarkable. So and we didn't have any problems with shoaling. It's the Georgia part of the ICW that has the bigger problems.
Okay.
The drawbridges, you got to do a little bit of planning for. And most of them, what our experience was, most of the drawbridges were just fine. They're friendly. They open when they say they do. Some open on demand, and they're very helpful. You might have to sit someplace for 5 minutes. Some of them open on a schedule. So, you sort of need to plan your distances, which you can do. We found the most challenging part of this trip for us, which if people have listened to the episodes, we're chronicling them. They're all out by now. Was the canal system, the New York State canal system. So we went up the Hudson River to Troy, and then you enter the locks, and you can either turn west and head out the Erie Canal towards Lake Ontario. We kept going north up the Champlain Canal to Lake Champlain. And the canals were, they're only open from 8 to 5. We had challenges. We'd call them on, and there was like the first day we entered the canal system, there was a total of 6 boats, and there was 6 of us traveling as a group. And some of the lock keepers wouldn't even answer the radio, right? I mean, there's 2 or 3 boats call them and no answer, and then all of a sudden you see the green light and the gates to the lock open. It was customer service aspect of it left something to be desired, which then causes stress, right? Because
Sure.
you're entering this canal with 5 other boats and you're jockeying, and there's no instructions on, okay, the first boat in, go all the way forward and dock on the right side. The next boat in, go all the way forward and dock on the left side. None of that stuff, right? So, but we found the drawbridges to be okay. Takes a little planning.
Yeah, that's, I mean, we definitely, it's on my mind to, I hate winter. So maybe it's because I don't ski so much anymore, but I love it when it's hot and sunny out and I can wear shorts and be barefoot. So I would love to go south for the winter. And it's definitely, we have a way that we could do that now.
Yes.
So it's definitely something I think about. Do you use Navionics? Because I know that like the sonar chart in Navionics is incredibly accurate because it's updated with crowdsourced information.
Yes. So, whether there's like 2 or 3 of those apps, and each of them sort of has its own little nugget that is better than the other ones, and then everything else is the same. But yeah, Navionics is good. I think it's Bob 423 is if you're going to do the ICW, you got to get Bob 423. Let me just see if I'm
interesting.
Yeah, it's called Bob 423 Tracks, and it's everybody swears by it. And and again, we had no trouble with. And you got to remember, the ICW is still a commercial shipping lane. We saw tugboats and barges. Right. So the boat we were on drew 5 feet. So, a big old barge is going to draw 5 feet as well. So we didn't have any trouble with that.
Yeah. Definitely on my radar for someday.
Yeah, that's cool.
More comfortable with this boat, and figure out what we do with the house in the winter and things like that.
Yeah,
there's all like bringing the dog on the boat and how we handle that. There's other logistical things to be figured out.
It's remarkable how many boats we saw with dogs.
Yeah,
we saw more boats with dogs than we did with kids.
Yeah. Well, dogs probably easier, but our dog, not only does he only go to the bathroom outside, but he only does it under cover of bushes. He doesn't even do it on grass. He goes, like, we never have to clean up after him because he'll go into like briars. It's like, well, I'm not going to pick it up in there. So I think he would be extremely confused. It would be very difficult to train him to go on a boat. So when we take him with us, we stayed overnight on the boat with him. It was 5 a.m. dinghy to the shore, and we went for a walk with him. So we just brought him to shore. So we would have to figure out how we do things like that. But
you have to get yourself a potted briar bush that you can keep on the boat.
Yeah, there you go. Some raspberries or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There's some methods that I've read out there to get them that are one idea is to get some AstroTurf and put it on a neighborhood fire hydrant and get good smells on it, and then have the dog learn on that, and then you can wash it off afterwards, which is really gross, but I can see how it would be effective. So yeah.
All right. Hey, Charlie, let's start wrapping this up. So is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to share with our listeners? Any tips, any thoughts, any final thoughts on this, your excursion here?
Well, my only final thought is I heard someone once say, I think it was on your podcast, and it might've been you, say, let's face it, sailing smaller boats is harder than sailing big boats. And I've now done both, and I think I agree. Mm-hmm. So lots more complexity in systems, but I'd see a gust coming across the water and be like, oh no, here we go, right? And the boat goes,
yes.
It's just, oh, okay, this is fine. I can handle this, oh, big wake, look out. All right.
Right.
This is no, I'm still getting used to the fact that this boat is 15 times heavier, is larger, and has a keel rather than the centerboard, and it's just, it's just a lot more stable and can handle a lot more. I feel safer and less nervous on this big, much more expensive boat with more on the line than I did on my small centerboard Rhodes 19.
Yeah.
And so that's how I was hoping it was, but I thought that was wishful thinking. I was like, oh, you're going to be so much more nervous. It's bigger. It's, it's going to cost more and that is true. If I crash it up, it will cost a lot more. But it just, I feel like that boat is taking care of me, and autopilot is amazing.
Yes. Yes.
That is a wonderful thing to have.
Yep.
Wouldn't sail without it now.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I find a bit more challenging, and as you gain experience, the nervousness goes away, and that is docking the boat.
For sure. Yeah, that's true.
So because you can't fend it off with your foot.
Right.
When I was coming in with my little Catalina 22, I could just stick my leg out and I could stop the boat, but that's not happening now. So, but then again, the gust of wind impact my boat less when I'm trying to dock it than the little boat. So
yeah, and I now have a bow thruster, which is cheating, but it's very handy.
No, it's not cheating. It's being smart. That's not cheating.
Well, I do want to. I still use. I love. We learned to use stopping springs, and I love spring lines, and I think it's good to. I try not to use the bow thruster in case it fails.
Yeah.
I think it's good practice to be able to dock and things without the bow thruster. But I do still use it pretty often, because that trying not to is like, well, I can figure this out, or I can just press this button, push off, and get out of here. So it is pretty nice to have. And in a boat, our boat has no prop wash because it has dual rudders.
Oh, okay.
So the downside of that is you can't swing the stern one way or another with prop wash. It does have a bit of prop walk, but not much, but no prop wash at all. So you don't need it with a 38-foot boat. But a boat with the rudder right behind the prop, you can swing the stern around a little bit. On this boat, you can't at all. Although those dual rudders, if you have any way on it all, you can swing the stern. I mean, it turns on a dime. It turns a very tight turning radius. So you kind of can swing it into the dock, but you have to be moving forward at the same time.
Yeah. The one thing that I learned, took me a while to figure this out in docking, is that most of the times when you come into the marina, either the dock hands or neighbors will come there to help you dock the boat.
Right.
And I have now learned that when I throw them a line, or my wife throws them a line, to give them specific instructions on what I want you to do with that line.
Yeah.
Like take this line and tie it to that cleat and keep me from swinging left or keep me from going back.
Right.
I give them specific instructions, because in the beginning I didn't. I just throw them a line. And, it was like, why'd you do that for? And I was like, of course I wouldn't say that, but I would think it. So now I give specific instructions, and I do the same when I'm catching a line from somebody. I say, okay, what would you like me to do with this?
Yeah.
And,
that's good, because, and I already have experienced that, and not everyone knows what a stopping spring is.
That's right.
I shouldn't have assumed that. And so, he grabbed the stern line, which on this fat boat with the beam all the way aft, you can put the stopping spring right next to you at the wheel if you can lasso a cleat. But there was someone there, so I handed it to him, and he put it really slack and then went off to grab the bow line. And I'm like, no, this needs to be tight. It was across from me because the throttle was over here and this was on starboard side. And he's like, yeah, you're getting close to the boat in front of you. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I wanted the stopping spring back there. And he's pulling my bow in, and it's too close, right? I mean, the boat, I'll never be able to get off. And I didn't. Yeah, it didn't communicate clearly. Put this tight right here, and then and don't worry about the bow, because it's going to come right in, and then I just leave it in idle forward, and then I can just step off the boat and attach the bow line, and it's no problem. That was the theory, but instead it was backing down hard and almost sending a boat in front of me, and other people coming to help, thinking, oh, this novice sailor has no idea what he's doing. And I actually had a pretty good plan that I think would have worked. I just didn't communicate it well.
Right. Because you have that plan in your head.
Right.
And they're probably thinking about how they dock their boat, which could be
Right.
totally different.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Or,
So-
oh, your bow's going to hit, let me pull on it, and it's like, that's okay. I mean, good, but not the most effective thing. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Charlie, super. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. And if you're game, I'd love to chat again sometime at the end of the season and talk about what you guys did over the summer. I'm sure that would be another great episode our listeners would love to hear.
Sure. They'll be doing passage and weather planning myself with no one else to rely on. So that's exciting and nerve-wracking. So yeah, I'd be happy to come back on.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Bela. Have a great day.
Bela, cool interview, great story. And I think we found out the answer to our question, did it have a good ending or not? What were your big takeaways from Charlie's story?
So this is a common problem when you buy a boat. And whether and from my perspective, it gives that tension that you talked about in the intro, whether you know how to sail really well and have a lot of experience or not, because you're on a new boat to you. You're not familiar with it. You don't know about its systems. And one of the other people that was on the podcast that we interviewed, Dan Koppelman, he purchased a new boat, and his wife and Dan sailed it from Florida, if I remember, all the way up to Maine. And I remember him saying, him and his wife, they spent like a month on the boat just in Florida, and they'd go out for day sails, and he got familiar with the boat. So he sort of understood all its systems, how it sails, how it handles in rough weather, etc. But a lot of people don't have the luxury of that time. And like here with this episode, it was like, okay, we got to get this thing moved in 4 days. We got to get it from Annapolis to Boston. And there's the whole notion of scheduling it, right? We're in Boston, we're watching the weather, and then it's like launching a rocket ship into space with NASA. It's okay, it's a go. Let's all get ready. We're going to go. And they flew down to Annapolis. You're watching the weather and you say, okay, we're leaving. So there is that tension you talked about. But the good news is, I think there's several different options here. One is you can get a friend to help you, which is, those of you listening to podcasts know that Mike Malakoff and I have been moving his boat from Florida up to Lake Champlain. So he got his friend, me, to help him move a boat. You can get it shipped. We had another episode with Simon Ballant when he sailed his boat to Europe. He had it shipped back to the United States. You can hire a captain, which is what this episode is all about. And so I think the important thing on whether you have a friend do it or whether you hire a captain is make sure you have a reasonable risk tolerance match. And so when Mike Malakoff and I were talking about moving his boat, and I've helped a couple other people move boats, I always sort of probe, okay, sort of what level of, sea state are you comfortable with? What sort of weather do you not go in? What sort of weather do you go in? Because I want to make sure that we're kind of adjacent, at least adjacent to each other in our risk tolerance. Because I don't want to be in a situation where the person I'm with is much more risk open or willing to take risks than I am, because then I'm going to be nervous and I'm not going to be comfortable. I'd much rather have it the other way, where I'm more of the risk taker. So anyway, I think there's a lot of good options. And think about what I call the risk match. And I think one of the challenges with hiring a captain is they're on the clock, and they move boats. When we've been bringing up the boat from Florida with Mike Malakoff, we ran into a couple captains who were moving boats for people, and oftentimes the owner of the boat wasn't even on the boat, but those captains go right there because they're getting paid and to move a boat, and they go out rough weather, calm weather, etc. So if you're going along, and here again, you can hire a captain that will take you with them, or you can hire a captain that'll just deliver the boat to you, and you can meet them at the dock at your home marina. So a bunch of different options. I think they're all good. And in this case, it all worked out great.
Yeah, and I think that there was some up and down moments and some mistakes made, and that's the thing. I think that, again, having some tolerance that everybody involved is probably going to make some mistakes, and everybody involved is going to do things a little bit differently. And the goal is, to get the boat from point A to point B without damage. But I think point B is it's a learning journey, right? And it's getting comfortable with your investment, getting comfortable with the crew that you're working with, whether it's your partner or a friend or whatever. Right. And learning from, if you're getting a captain, I think the cool thing was learning from the captain, right. And keeping your eyes and ears open and seeing how they do things. So, to me, this is a really cool way to do it. And I mean, if you're retired, spending that month on the boat, right, getting to know it first before moving it is pretty cool. But the luxury of time is an amazing thing. But yeah, great. Nicely summarized. But I thought this was a cool conversation. It was really cool to get the update from Charlie. And I hope we hear back from him kind of on some of the adventures that he has now that his boat is in place, where he is, and he can maybe relax a little bit and learn to enjoy the boat.
Yeah. And I think the one thing I would add to all of this is enjoy the experience.
Yeah.
And by making sure that you talk about these things in advance, whether it's you're bringing a friend along or whether you're hiring a captain, and kind of making sure you're closely aligned on a lot of these types of factors and decisions, that will make the experience much more enjoyable for you. And so that's why I think that's really key.
Yeah. And maybe, Bela, it's a nice time to kind of think about and reflect back on your experience, because I remember really well when you bought your new boat. And just now we were talking before we started recording too about how much enjoyment you've been getting out of it and how much you've been using it and how it's brought your family close together. And you've already made a lot of great memories, I think, on your boat already. But those first days were stressful, right? I remember the first kind of, so maybe that's a nice time for everybody who's had a boat for a while to reflect on, it was stressful in the beginning, but think about the benefits of being a sailor and the social ties and the family ties and the beautiful views and the weathers. And hopefully those are all better than the stresses and the financial investments sometimes that we've heard about too. But maybe just a second to be thankful for the opportunities that people have to sail and to be on the water with people they care about. It's kind of a cool way to wrap this one up. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. I'm glad you brought that up. And let's wrap this one up and close it out.
All right. Well, listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode. And we hope that you found our conversation with Charlie interesting and thought-provoking as we did. And as always, if you have questions about what we've discussed, feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
And then finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that like button on your app. It helps other people find us because it makes us go up higher in their search. And if you know of someone that would make a good guest for the show, let us know. That's it for today's episode. Hope to see you out there on the water. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See y'all soon.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, thanks for listening and auf Wiedersehen.